All right. So, real quick advertisement. I'm going to tell my testimony today. Hopefully Rachel will be able to tell hers. It depends on how long-winded I get. But we need people to tell their testimonies next week. Next week is y'all.
All y'all.
Not all y'all. Because that would be long. But I need a few. Please talk to me. Please talk to me. I've got a couple, but I would, yes. And we will have opportunities over the next few months if we've got more people who want to tell theirs than do. But our testimony is what God has done in our lives, how He has shaped us and what life has come and how He has worked. This is something we are commanded to do. We are commanded to be able to tell it. Now, not every detail, not all the time. I laid my entire testimony out once for a counselor. It took 4.5 hours. So, I will shorten it. So, Kevin Barry had a very boring growing up. It was good. Kevin Barry grew up about about half hour from here or so. My mom's a doctor, my dad's a farmer. Great growing up. My family taught me about Jesus. I remember we went to the little church in Lewis, Iowa, and there was a minister there, Randy Spilker was there at the time, and I remember sitting, my parents always talked to me about Jesus, and I remember sitting, listening to a sermon. I don't remember what the sermon was about, but I remember sitting there and realizing that the gospel commands me to repent and be baptized, and I hadn't done that. So I went up to my mom, who was playing piano, and said, I'm not sure I'm going to heaven. If I died today, can we fix that? And so that I was baptized the next day. My new birthday is February 4th, 1994. That's my new birthday. And it was wonderful. It was warm. They bothered to warm the water. That was a good thing. Not everyone got that. But then as I grew, again, I had an extremely boring growing up. Like some people have these like rebellious teenager years or whatever. No, I wasn't. The most rebellious thing I remember doing was playing cat and mouse with some friends within my car in Griswold. That was the most like rebellious things I can remember doing. But when I was a teenager, about 17 years old, I believe that everyone, especially if you come to know Jesus as a child, at some point, there's a point where you are transitioning from the faith of a child to the faith of an adult. Do I actually believe this? Is there really evidence for this? Is this a fairy tale or is this real? And when I was about 17, I remember going through that. I wasn't I wouldn't call myself a doubter, but I really wanted to know, is this real? And I was, at the time, I happened to be on the campus of Nebraska Christian College doing a singing tour thing, and I went and talked to some of the guys that were helping out, and to their credit, they didn't say things like, well, just believe. Yeah, that's helpful. No, they didn't say that. They said, here's some book recommendations. Read this scripture. Go search it out for yourself. And I learned a phrase that I will always cherish, that truth is still truth on the other side of a question. If you seek truth, if you ask, is God real? And you actually ask the question and actually seek it out, asking the question doesn't change the truth of the matter. It just means you're going to go seek it out. Truth is still truth on the other side of a question. I love that phrase. Well, anyway, so I got through that, and then I decided I was going to be an aerospace engineer. I wanted to design aircraft. That's what I wanted to do. That was my thing. But my mom made me go to Bible college. She said that she would pay for the rest of my schooling if I went to 1 year of Bible college. My mom is an MD, and she went to 2 years of Bible college at Central Christian College of the Bible, which I remember not knowing why I was going to Bible college, because I grew up in church. I went to church all the time. I mean, constantly it seemed. So of course, why would I need to go to Bible college? Oh my goodness, I had no idea what I didn't know. oh my goodness, one of the most transformative moments in my life was when we were there for orientation. And they have this test that they give to incoming freshmen, and then they give the same test to you when you graduate. And it has nothing to do with your grade. It doesn't affect it at all. It is, they're seeing if you learned anything, you know, pre to post test. They're evaluating their internal metrics, you know, to see if they're... I remember taking that test after going to church and going to Sunday school and going to VBS my whole life. And I remember reading that going, who? Where? What? I didn't know any of these things. And I come out of there, I remember in orientation, the guy up front saying, how many of you took the Bible entrance exam? How many of you felt like pagans? You know, it just, I had no idea. And so, while I was there, one of the first classes that I took, it was called Christ in the Bible. It was about believing, evidence why the Bible is true, why God is true, these kinds of things. And one of the first things that he did was have each one of us stand up and tell our testimony, which up to that point, my testimony kind of ended right there. Kind of boring. In a good way, like, good thing. But I remember getting up there and thinking, well, I'm at a Bible college. I've got, you know, all these kids are going to have boring testimonies like mine. No. Most of the kids had come from very broken families, very broken homes. They had done all kinds of crazy stuff. I mean, the number of former drug addicts in my class was awesome. But each of them sounded, but a lot of those sounded something like this. I was a blankety blank, whatever, you know, whatever, fill in the blank. But a youth minister got a hold of me and God changed my life. But my friend in school told me about Jesus and drew me to youth group. A minister caught me after school one day or something, you know, something like that. And my life was forever changed, and I want to do that for other people. Like that was how their testimony went. I'm sitting here going, I want a testimony like, oh wait, I know I really don't. Like, I kind of like my boring growing up. Well, I had no idea how good I had it growing up, basically. Then I met Kendra, who didn't like me. No, she didn't like me at all. I met Rachel for that matter as well. But anyway, God changed my mind. I remember sitting in a sermon that I'd heard a dozen times that said, you know, if you've got gifts, use them for God. And fine. So I stayed in Bible college, stayed there for 4 years, graduated. I married Kendra, and we started ministering in a little church in Kansas called Altoona. Maybe you've been through there or seen that. Little church. Was there for 2 years, and we moved to Cincinnati to do my master's work, and then moved to Amaret, Missouri for a new ministry in 2009. We were there for 6 years. And up to this point, again, my life had been relatively easy when it comes to problems. Like it was really smooth sailing. Like, you know, God was good, and everything was a ball. Well, went downhill from there. From the first moment, I shouldn't say from the first moment, one of the first conversations that I had with Kendra was that she wanted to be a mommy. I wanted to be a daddy. So we started working on that. And then she got pregnant. Yay! And then she wasn't. She had a miscarriage. That hurt in a place I didn't know what that felt like. I had never experienced something like that before. Well, all right, move on. She got pregnant again. And this baby kept going and going and going. We had ultrasounds, all the things, and then at almost 20 weeks, miscarriage again. I got to hold that was farther along. I got to hold my baby. I got to hold my son. One of the counselors at the hospital recommended naming the children as a way to grieve. So we named we named the first one, we retroactively named the first one Enoch. Because in the Bible, Enoch walked with God and was no more. And then we named the second one Corbin, which comes from Mark chapter 7. It's a gift devoted to God. And then, as if all that wasn't fun enough, Kendra had a seizure. funny story in the midst of that, but I don't have time. But she had a seizure, went to the hospital, discovered at the hospital that she was pregnant again. Yay! And had a brain tumor. Ooh. Yeah, not yay. We discovered she had a brain tumor, but they wouldn't do any treatment or any further diagnostics because she was pregnant. How do you pray? How do you pray? If you don't treat my wife, I might lose her. But if you treat my wife, I might lose my baby. How do you pray? So we prayed, God, you take care of it. They offered us to abort the baby so we could, like, are you kidding? God, you take care of it. Well, we lost that one. We named that one Karen, which is a form of the Greek word for grace. Because we didn't have to pick. Well, brain surgery number 1. Foreshadowing. There's more. Did you know they do those brain surgeries awake? No. Got to talk to her on the phone while her brain was open. That's a whole different thing. I won't call that fun, but it was interesting. So we had the brain surgery, and is it going to grow back? Well, maybe. We don't know. But no real bad symptoms, everything. So, can we try again for another baby? Yes. Can you get off seizure medicine? Yes. Go good. And then we had little Tabitha. We took her name from Acts chapter 9 because Tabitha's the little girl that came back to life. And we thought after all that we'd been through that would be appropriate. However, when she was about 7 months along, Kendra had another seizure. And another CT scan revealed it's back. So, shortly, she was tiny, like a month old. Brain surgery number 2. Got to FaceTime her this time. We got to see it. It was kind of cool. Well, she's growing, and we wanted to adopt because they told us not to try for another child because pregnancy hormones can do weird things with cancer. So we tried. State wouldn't let us for various reasons. Again, this took 4.5 hours once, so ask me for details later. We moved to a town in Kansas called Sedgwick. And while we were there, her tumor grew back again. Brain surgery number 3. Now, this time, symptoms really started to appear. Her word finding was it wasn't good. Her ability to remember things was severely diminished. Her ability to use words properly was severely diminished. But she was there. It's all good. Well, we were at that church for about 4 years, and this is where my testimony takes quite a turn. There was some people that didn't like me. Can you imagine? I heard once somebody say that if you want to please everybody, say nothing, do nothing, be nothing. You'll please everybody. Well, if you know me about 5 minutes, I don't do that. I'm rather obnoxious. There was a person in the church who liked things to go her way. And yeah, this part of the story could take about 2 hours. I'm going to do it in about 2 minutes. Loads. What? Can we bring lunch in? But all I want to say is that after 2 years of trying to get me fired, she was unsuccessful. I caught her stealing. I caught her lying. And she was a staff member. So I worked with the elders, I worked with the board to finally decide it's time. Let's fire her. Because this is just obnoxious. This is stupid. 5 days later, I was accused of a sex crime. Arrested, and spent the next 3 years dealing with our justice system. I only saw a judge twice in that entire time because the prosecution kept asking for continuance because they were waiting for the other shoe to drop. There isn't another shoe because I didn't do it. And so, hey. But she got her wish. So now the next 3 years I'm sitting here trying to figure out what I'm going to do with my life. How am I going to support my family? What is the next thing in my life? Because Amazon wouldn't hire me because I had a pending case in the middle. You can't move boxes? Really? So I ended up working at a pig farm. I ended up working, which gave me one of the neatest scars I've gotten in my life. I've got a big scar across the back of my leg because a boar decided he didn't want me in his pen. He threw me out with his mouth. 32 stitches later, I've got a beauty back here. Well, that eventually was dropped because, well, I didn't do anything. But guess what? I was a little angry. I was a little frustrated. I felt betrayed. I felt listless. Like, what am I going to do? Like how am I going to move on? Like, what is move on? I mean, there's no way that I could ever, and as you can tell since I'm telling you, some people said, well, it's been dropped. You don't have to tell anybody. I'm like, are you kidding? This is a huge part of my testimony. Not to mention, if you want some really creative writing, I was the top story for 3 nights in a row at 5, 6, 9, and 10 in Wichita. You should look it up. It's really interesting. Really interesting creative writing, too. But the church stood behind me during that process. They knew what she was, which actually bothered me later why they didn't fire her earlier, because apparently she'd done this kind of thing before. But anyway, how am I going to do this? How am I going to take care of this? Finally, I was vindicated, but I was angry. My thoughts for my accusers were not good. I had some very not Christian thoughts about those people and wondered when the next meteor shower was coming. I had some really dark thoughts. I've been told my whole life, forgive. Well, that's really easy when they steal a pack of gum. That's not that hard when they steal a pack of gum to forgive someone. It's not that hard to forgive someone who called you a bad name. It's completely different when my house is gone, my job is gone, my reputation is gone. How am I going to move on? How am I going to take care of my family? Good. I learned a new depth to forgiveness that I had never known. And that took a long, long time. I worked with some mentors. And this is where God really stepped in my life. That I was never mad at God. Like, I know that evil people do evil things, and even people who claim the name Christ can do evil things sometimes, because, well, we're all sinners, regardless of whatever. But I wasn't mad at God, but let's be honest, the church frustrated me, and every time I was inside of one, I'm sitting here going, but I knew that I needed to go to church, because in the church, that's where we connect with God's people. That's where we are prayed for. That's where we are comforted. That's where we are cared for. That's where we are given meals when we're sick, which I'll print the sheet here in a second, and we'll give meals to them when he gets home. And side note. But that is where we get support when we go through the garbage of life. Oh, by the way, Kendra had brain surgery number 4. Actually, one of the cool things God did was that the cancer had been on a 2-year rotation and then took 4 years off during that time so that we weren't having to deal with both at the same time. Thought that was good. But I worked with several mentors about healing, about forgiveness. I eventually moved to Omaha to serve with a mentor of mine who helped me in the process of forgiving, which is a daily struggle. I still work on it a little bit, but it's so much better. I worked over in Omaha at Woodhouse to support my family during that time. I served in a volunteer capacity in the church in Omaha. It was wonderful to be able to teach and serve again, and I felt called to do it. I told people, again, because I was so frustrated with what had happened, I said, I want to do something else. I looked into doing financial management training. I like doing that. That's one of my favorite things to do, is teach people about money. Teach me about Jesus and money. Those are my two favorite things to teach about. And I feel like I'd be good at it. But I just couldn't get excited about it. And I tried various other things, and I just kept coming back to, God has put a call on my life to do this. And having gone through the garbage that I've gone through, everyone has a bad day. Everyone has a bad day. Everyone has a day at your job when you're like, I don't like this job. They can take it and shove it. You know, you've all had that day, right? At your job. Ministers are no different. There were lots of days in those 10 years prior to that I was like, I need to do something else. One of the things I took away from that time away because of the accusations is that bad days happen. I mean, you people just kidding. But I will never feel that way again about this job because it is too precious. It is too precious. I love being able to tell people about Jesus. And while we were there, I was looking for opportunities to serve. We began serving here. And again, for full disclosure, the leadership team knew all of this. I told them all this before any of that. And they let me come anyway. I don't know. But we moved to Omaha for my mentor, but also for Kendra's medical care, and her health went downhill again. The next couple of years, her abilities declined. And by the time most of you knew my wife, she had lost the ability to read or write. It was so frustrating for her to live like that. And she tried to continue to be in the church as often as she could. In fact, she died Tuesday morning, but was here on that Sunday. She died February 28th, 2023, and it was so hard, but God was with us. I had family and church people, including some of you here, around Tabitha and I during that time, and her funeral was about celebrating God's work and God's love in her life, and though I am biased, I think it was one of the best funerals I'd ever been to. We continue to serve here, looking for what was next. God provided Rachel as a wife and mother. By the way, Kendra had that planned years ago. Shh. God provided a new job, a new house, and God provided purpose in my life. And I know that the goal of life is not happiness. We discussed that as we went through Ecclesiastes. The goal of life is not happiness. It's not. It's about serving God. But with that said, I'm happier now than I've been in an awfully long time. Thank you for supporting us. God has been with me through ups and downs of life. And with all that garbage having gone through, I'm fairly confident God has something cool in mind for me and for us. So let's get after it. I'm an open book. Again, I compressed it. If you have any questions, there is no question I won't answer. I probably won't tell you my bank account number. But other than that, I decided a long time ago that being embarrassed of God's work in my life, good or bad, is not a thing I want to do. So, all right, I have a question for the crowd. That was long. It should be time for me to quit and move on and whatever, but Rachel's supposed to give her testimony today too. Is there anyone who would mind her doing 10, 12 more minutes? 15 minutes. Would anybody up? I recognize we'll be late. Is that okay? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes.
Anybody know? All right. Right up here.
tell you my story. This will be interesting. Just like Kevin said, the story of my conversion in younger years is pretty boring. I grew up in a Christian family. I was baptized by the age of 6. But of course, at the age of 6, you don't fully understand what you're getting yourself into. But I believe God meets you where you are, and however well you understand, that's where He meets you. He leads you in deeper. And so He provided several youth ministers, and went to several church camps and all of those things that really started to pull on my heart and take me deeper into Christ when I was in my early teens. And then one day, someone at my church handed out this little piece of paper right here. It's from October of 1999. But this is a prayer calendar. So for the month of October, we are supposed to pray for 2 countries every day from the 1040 window. That's a stretch of Asia and Africa where most people in those countries have never heard the name of Jesus. And so for the month of October, I prayed through this little calendar. And I thought, well, that was a lot of fun. So I did it again in November. And then I did it again in December. And I just kept right on trucking for about a year. I prayed through this little calendar. And at the end of that year, while I was praying, I ought to warn you right now, if you pray, it's powerful. God does stuff. And not only does He answer those prayers, but He changes you. So I was praying for these countries, and in the middle of that prayer, I heard God's voice, not with my ears, but with my heart. I heard God say, all right, you go. I had not considered that option. That was a complete surprise to me. I was like, oh, okay. I think He told me when I was 15 that I was going to be a missionary so that I could give my parents 10 years warning before I actually left. That their baby was going across the world, they needed time to prepare. But just a couple of months after that, my family moved to Kentucky. And I was not happy about moving to Kentucky. I'd grown up since second grade. I'd been in the same town, gone to the same church, went to the school. I loved my school, I loved my church, I loved my youth group, I loved my friends. I did not want to leave. And here God is pulling me away. And I was angry at the time. I was angry at my dad for moving us. But I can see now God was teaching me to let go of the things of this world and not to have them as such a high priority. Because God's got to go with me wherever I go. And if I can't handle moving one state over, how on earth am I going to handle going an entire planet away? Not 2 different planets, the other side of this one. You know what I mean. So anyway, after spending 2 years in Kentucky, which were wonderful years, we started a Bible study in my high school, and wonderful years where God continued to pull me deeper and deeper and teach me how to serve and love others. But after graduating from high school, I moved back to Joplin, which is where I had grown up, so I could go to Ozark Christian College. And when I got there, I was just going to be a missions major. And my mother encouraged me to have a tent making skill, have a skill that I can use to actually get into a country on a visa, because a lot of those countries that I mentioned before, this is where I wanted to go, one of these countries. A lot of these countries don't just let you go in as a missionary. You've got to go in as a something. And I mentioned somebody earlier today, I fainted at the sight of blood, so I wasn't about to go as a nurse. So why don't you try English teaching? I was like, oh, Mom, that's a terrible idea. I hate public speaking. I wouldn't want to be up in front of kids. I wouldn't want to take care. I'd be a terrible teacher. What's wrong with you? But, first couple of years of college are just basic classes anyway. I can shut mom up. I'll change it later. It's fine. So I put it down there that I was a TESOL major, teaching English to speakers of other languages. And, you know, TESOL and Bible, because those are Christian college. And it was after my sophomore year that I signed up to go to China for a summer camp. So this was a month-long thing where we're going to teach English and invest in the lives of our students, however we can. All right, so when we got to this summer, so I have to explain, because my purpose was twofold. First of all, I really wanted to go and see what it was like to be in a foreign country for a whole month. This was the longest mission trip I'd ever been on. But I also wanted to prove Mom wrong. I'm gonna go and I'm gonna teach for 1 month. I'm gonna prove to my mother that I can't do this, and then I can change. I have an excuse to change my major. So I got there, and the camp had assigned me the lowest level class, because it's my major. Clearly she's good at this sort of thing, so we'll give her the students that can't actually use the curriculum, because their English is too low. So my first class bombed. Oh, it was awful. I just stood there talking, and they just blinked at me, and there was no communication happening. It was awful. And so I went back to my room, and we had a couple hours before our evening class, and I just figuratively chucked the curriculum out the window and wrote my own lesson plan. And I went back in that evening and I taught my lesson plan. It was so much fun. Oh, I had such a ball. They were laughing and smiling, and we were communicating, and we were learning, and I had so much fun. And I went back to team debriefing that night, and I said, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. Don't tell my mother. Anyway, that was only after my sophomore year, so I went back to Ozark after that. And I met Amy and Kendra and Kevin, and they became my support team. The whole time I lived in China, we met weekly over Skype, and we talked together, and we laughed together, and we prayed together. And they were my support, my anchor, when I was all alone in a foreign country. So that was incredibly important to me. Thank you very much. But during my last semester or so, I went and searched for an organization to go with to China, and I found one called CRAM Worldwide. It's Christ Reaching Asian Mission Worldwide. And they had an organization that had set up a special school and a farm and a ranch and a language school in China. And so I went to go be part of their language school, and I was going to teach English at the school, and then on the side, you know, we can invite our students over to our house, and we can have Bible studies, and we can do things privately that we can't do in the school. But that was my goal. And I got there, and absolutely nothing happened the way I was expecting it to. I had visited for a summer before I moved there permanently, and I had been given a class immediately, thrown right into a class. It was already an ongoing class. They'd lost their teacher who left, and I came the day after he left and said, go into a classroom. However, now that I'm there permanently, I had come just after a semester started. I had to wait 6 months to get my own class. So that was not what I was expecting, so I kind of didn't know what to do for the first 6 months. And a friend of mine introduced me to some people from a church who were looking for someone who could help them learn and improve their worship team at church. And so they kind of wanted voice lessons, worship team lessons, music lessons of some sort. And I'm sitting there going, that's not the degree I got at Ozark. I've never had a voice lesson in my life. I've been in choir, but I don't know how to teach somebody else how to sing. I've been on a worship team once in my life. I don't know how to do worship team for, it was a big church, a huge church. Because the city only allows one official church in town, so it's a big church, you know. And so I don't know how to do this. But this was the opportunity that God had placed before me. I couldn't teach English. This is what I have. Okay, I'll try. 2 weeks after I started my class, the girl who's supposed to be interpreting for me quit. Oh no. I just got to China. I don't speak Chinese yet. So I not only had to figure out what to teach, but I had to figure out how to say it in a way that anyone's going to understand. Plus, I am trying to figure out how to play piano for the songs that we're trying to use. Like, I can't play piano. I can't speak Chinese. I didn't know how. I was wholly unqualified. I felt foolish every time I stood up in front of that class. And I kept wondering why these students keep coming back. But they just kept coming back. For 8 years, they kept coming back. And it was one of those things, it was the most difficult thing as far as classes go that I had to do while I was there. But it was also probably the thing that helped me the most. It helped me learn language. I had to build relationships. When I first got to China, I did not like Chinese food at all. That first month that I was there, I lost 10 pounds. Not good at all. But meeting with them, they fed me, and I got to experience home-cooked Chinese food, which is completely different from the stuff you get in restaurants. And they taught me how to live in China and how to eat in China. And it established me in China. If God had not given me that class, if I had not been willing to take that class because I was afraid or I felt unqualified, I would have missed so much. I hope that they got something out of that class, but I got something out of that. And God brought a lot of other people into my life while I was living in China. First, He brought a woman named Betty. Betty had amazing English, so 2 weeks after I got in China, we could already be friends, even though I couldn't speak Chinese yet. And so we started. She is a leader at a small home church. There's 2 different types of churches in China. There's the official state government church, which is limited in what they're allowed to teach according to what the government says they can teach. They can teach the teachings of Jesus, but they can't teach a second coming, because your hope has to be in the government, not in Jesus. So they're very restricted on what they can teach. A lot of churches ignore that, but they get in trouble sometimes for it. But anyway, so she's a house church. House churches, if they get caught, they get in trouble, but they can teach whatever they want because the government doesn't know they're there. So that's where she worked, and so we would have Bible studies together. First it was just us, and then she started inviting me to come teach her youth group on occasion. We couldn't do it every week because a foreigner attracts a lot of attention, and again, this is a house church that's trying to fly under the radar, so we did it sporadically. But then she eventually invited me to start teaching a Bible English class. She had a lot of people in her church that wanted to learn some English and mix in some Bible, so we can invite people and we can get a little bit of both. And that was a very interesting class, because you have people with very beginner English and people like Betty who could speak English great. I had 6-year-olds, I had 40-year-olds, all in one class. And we're teaching 2 different things, Bible and English, all at the same time. There's a lesson plan, head scratcher for you, but we got there. And again, that class lasted 10 years. It stopped when I left. That's the only reason we ever stopped that class. A few years later, a friend of mine named Judy asked me to start teaching a children's Bible study. Now, you have to remember, this is China. You teach religion to anyone under the age of 18 is illegal at any point, even in your own home to your own children. It is illegal. So having a children's Bible study is not a small thing. But she taught out of her home. She taught English in her home. And so she invited her students to come over for an extra free class. I was the advertising point, because then you get to come over and hear the native speakers speak English. And so I would teach a 30-minute lesson on the Bible in English, very, very simplified English. And then she would stand up and she would teach them the Bible in Chinese for 45 minutes. I was just there to get them in the door. They got a whole lot more out of her lesson because they could actually understand what she was saying. But it was the only place that they were ever going to hear about Jesus. It was the only place they were ever going to learn about the Bible. And we had a chance to teach that class. And then she added on another class. In the mornings, she added on an adult Bible study. And they weren't trying to learn English, so she just interpreted for me. That was great. And that class is actually still going because I'm teaching it over the computer. So we still meet. I call it an evening class. For them, it's a morning class because time zones in China and America are flip-flopped. So they meet on Tuesday morning. For me, it's Monday night. We have a Bible study. So I suppose if you ever want to come and listen to a Chinese Bible study, I'm still speaking in English, so you can understand it. It'll be great. But there were a lot of opportunities that God gave me in China. I've now just summarized 12 and a half years in like 5 minutes. So there was a lot of other things that happened. There were so many other things that happened. So many opportunities that God gave me, and every single one, I felt unqualified, and I felt like this is a big scary thing and I can't do it. God, ask somebody else. But this is what God gave me. This is where He put me. And every time I said, okay, I'll do it, He was right there. He always gave me what I needed, because He's not going to ask you to do something if He's not going to be right there with you, with His power, with His wisdom, helping you do it. So don't let anybody, or including yourself, tell you that you can't do something, because He can. But then, after 12 and a half years of living in China, things started to change. First, COVID happened. COVID changed a lot of things. And we weren't able, I was now working for a different school. We weren't able to have classes like we normally did because, COVID restrictions. And so we lost a lot of students. We did some on the computer, which I hated. But I could see if things continued like this, the school isn't going to stay afloat. And if there's no school, I don't have a visa. And if I don't have a visa, I can't stay in China. So I started to consider what would happen if I had to come back to the States. And one of the things I was worried about was I bought a house, an apartment really, but I own property in the country now. If I just leave, now I just have this empty apartment just sitting there. I can't do anything with it. What do you do with it? And so I started praying, God, if it's time for me to leave, please give me a solution for my house. Take care of my house. I don't know what else to do about it. And then things got even worse. The government started making restrictions on extracurricular schools, like the one that I was working for. It wasn't like a public school. It was like in the afternoons and evenings and weekends when we would teach English to our students. And they said they restricted our hours. They said, oh, you can only have classes on weeknights. No weekends, no holidays. 99% of our classes were on weekends and holidays. So that, again, cut our student base in half for the second time. And I was like, there's no way the school's gonna make it. What are we gonna do? And it was around that time when I got a phone call from the founder of CRAM, the organization that I had originally went with. Their school had gone under, kind of been stolen from them, more or less, in 2012. I hadn't been part of the organization since 2012. Now, 9 years later, I get a phone call from the founder out of the blue, just completely unexpected. And he says, oh, Rachel, I've heard that there's been lots of changes in China, that there's a lot of difficulties in China. If you need to leave, I would be willing to buy your house. Where did that come from? He didn't know any of this stuff. He hadn't talked to me in years. And he's out of the blue offers up to buy my house. Well, if that's not an answer to prayer, I don't know what is. So I called up my parents and I said, I think I'm coming home. And I told my boss, I'm sorry, I'm going to quit. I'm going back to America. I told everybody, I told all my friends I'm leaving. It was very hard to do because China was home by then. And I called him up a week or so later and I said, all right, we need to hammer out some of the details. And he hemmed and he hawed. Oh, it's a board decision. I can't make it by myself. This sort of thing. Really, the thing was he just has a heart for helping people, and sometimes he jumps ahead before he really should. And so it turned out that he was not able to buy my house. He would be happy to help me find a realtor, but that was all he could do. And I was sitting there going, God, I'm confused. I thought that was the clearest message I could have ever asked for. And suddenly it's gone. I don't understand. And so the next morning I went down to Judy. We were going to go do a Bible study with a shut-in lady. And I told her my story. And her reaction was not what I was expecting it to be. I was expecting it to be something like, oh, Rachel, I'm so sorry. But instead it was, you need someone to buy your house? I need to buy a house.
Oh my goodness.
Well, here's the funny thing is my house was, I thought it was a terrible house. Well, I loved it. It was right in the middle of town. It was within walking distance of my school, but I didn't know why anyone else would love it. It was one of the oldest buildings in town. It was on Construction Street down a back alley. So picture living in like the back parking lot of Lowe's, and that's my house, all right? It's not a great location as far as being pretty or anything. It's a lovely view out my bedroom window of a shed. But it was in the right school zone for her 2 grandsons, which is all she wanted, was to be in the right school zone for her 2 grandsons. And so God had worked it out the only way it was going to work out right. Because he wanted me to leave, but I wasn't going to leave until there was a solution for the house. She needed a house, but she wasn't going to ask me to sell my house because she didn't want me to leave. So that was never going to work out. So God put it on the founder of Cran's heart to offer to buy my house, even though he couldn't. And God worked it out, even though he couldn't buy it, that my house was still going to get sold immediately. And about a month later, the government called up the school that I worked for and said, we changed our mind. We're just going to shut your school down now. You have 2 weeks. So if I had not already started preparing to leave, if I had not already sold my house, if I had not already bought a plane ticket, I would have had 2 weeks to do everything. To sell my house, to get a plane ticket, to say goodbye to everyone that I've known and loved for 12 years. I would have had to do it in 2 weeks. But God set it up in such a perfect way that I didn't have to leave angry at the government for kicking me out, or feeling like I was in a rush and that I hadn't been able to leave well, or that I had left unfinished business behind. He set it up in such a perfect way. He was so gentle, because I could have left feeling angry at China because they kicked me out, or alternatively, if I had chosen to leave and then the school had survived and thrived and been perfectly fine, I would have felt like I had left early. I had left my post. This was my lifelong goal. This was my calling, and I left. And I would have felt guilty. But God worked it out in such a perfect way that I don't have to be angry. And I don't have to feel guilty. He was bringing me home when I was supposed to come home, and I didn't know why. Now I do. He was bringing me home at the perfect time to get me ready for a family. I didn't know that, but he was. And God brought me through all of that. And now I can't wait to see what God is going to do through us here. Because he's not done yet. He brought us here for a reason. We're all here for a reason. And I'm so thankful. Thank you for giving me a little bit of extra time.
So who's ready to give their testimony next week? Please come talk to me. Due to the fact that we're way over on time, let's just pray and be dismissed. But this is what we are called to tell our story because God is awesome. And He works through life's garbage and He makes beauty out of ashes. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you so very much for this day. We thank you for your word, but we thank you that you are still active today, that you work through us today, that you love us today, that you are compassionate and caring and active in our lives today. And Lord, we know what you have done in the past, but we have seen it ourselves, what you have done in our lives. It is not something far off. It is not something in ancient history. It was not only in ancient history, it is also today. Lord, please help us to have the courage to share our story, to share the hope that you have given us. Lord, we love you and we thank you. Amen.